Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm going to switch to German now und möchte mich auch ganz herzlich für die wunderbare Organisation und auch für die Einladung zu diesem Workshop bedanken. Hannah Arendt schrieb 1963 an Siegfried Moses, nachdem dieser ihr angekündigt hatte, dass das Council of Jews from Germany ihr Buch in Eichmann in Jerusalem öffentlich kritisieren werde. Arendt schrieb und antwortete darauf, Zitat, und Dank für die Vorankündigung der geplanten Kriegserklärung. Dazu habe ich eigentlich nur eines zu bemerken. Sie nennen Hilberg, Bettelheim und mich. Richten Sie besser den Angriff gegen mich allein, eventuell noch gegen Hilberg, mit dessen ja vorzüglich gearbeiteten Buch Sie es sich nicht zu leicht machen dürfen. Hilberg kann man nur rein wissenschaftlich ernst nehmen. Er arbeitet wirklich aus den Quellen. Geistig ist er leider nicht wirklich von Rang, wie Sie aus seinen ziemlich albernen Meinungen über Deutsche und Juden überhaupt leicht entnehmen können. Diese sehr harte Aussage Hannah Arendts verwundert zunächst, da es sich bei dem Konflikt Hilberg und Arendt nicht um einen wissenschaftlichen Diskurs handelte, in der zwei vollkommen gegensätzliche Positionen einander gegenüberstanden. Im Gegenteil, Hilberg und Arendt gehörten zu den ersten Wissenschaftlern, die sich dem Genozid an den europäischen Juden mithilfe eines bürokratischen Ansatzes widmeten. Für ihre Arbeiten, die kurz nacheinander erschienen sind, Hilbergs Dissertation The Destruction of European Jews 1961 in den USA und Arendts Eichmann in Jerusalem 1963 in Buchform, erhielten beide vehemente Kritik, besonders von jüdischer Seite, und zwar aufgrund ihrer sogenannten Kollaborationsthese. Arendt und Hilberg schlossen sich jedoch nicht gegen diese gemeinsame Kritik und auch nicht gegen das zu diesem Zeitpunkt noch vorherrschende Schweigen gegenüber dem Holocaust zusammen. Stattdessen kritisierten sie sich gegenseitig, und zwar, wie hier auch schon deutlich wird, auf sehr vehemente Art und Weise, obwohl sie sich beide nicht persönlich gekannt hatten und auch nie persönlich miteinander korrespondiert hatten. Was verbirgt sich hinter diesem Konflikt? Und was kann man aus diesem Konflikt über die Wissenschaftler Arendt und Hilberg erfahren? Ich möchte im Folgenden zunächst noch einmal genauer auf die Position Arendts gegenüber Hilberg angehen, auch anhand des einführenden Zitates. Danach möchte ich die beiden umstrittensten Thesen aus ihren Büchern, also die sogenannte Kollaborationsthese und die These der Banalität des Bösen, noch einmal inhaltlich auf Ähnlichkeiten und Unterschiede untersuchen, und abschließend folgen dann Hilbergs Kritikpunkte und Äußerungen gegenüber Arendt. Arendts Positionierung gegenüber Hilberg umfasst im Wesentlichen zwei Aspekte, wie aus diesem Zitat deutlich wird. Einerseits schätzte sie seine wissenschaftlichen Fertigkeiten, die in seiner Quellenarbeit deutlich werden. So schrieb sie in Eichmann in Jerusalem, bezeichnete sie Hilbergs Werk unter anderem als, Zitat, die ausführlichste und auch fundierteste quellenmäßige Darstellung der Judenpolitik des Dritten Reiches. Andererseits teilte sie jedoch auch die zeitgenössische Kritik an seinen teils generalisierenden und unsachlichen Schlussfolgerungen über die Geschichte der Antike, über die Geschichte der Juden seit der Antike, die er in seiner Einleitung gezogen hatte. Seine Fertigkeiten als Wissenschaftler grenzt sie somit von seinen geistigen und intellektuellen Kompetenzen ab. Damit vollzieht Arendt eine Unterscheidung zwischen Hilberg als Wissenschaftler und Hilberg als Intellektuellen. Ein Jahr später, also 1964, bekräftigte Arendt diese Position gegenüber Hilberg, als sie an ihren Lehrer Karl Jaspers schrieb. Jaspers hatte sie darauf hingewiesen, dass Hilberg während einer Diskussionsveranstaltung in New York für sie Partei ergriffen habe. Darauf schreibt Arendt, Zitat, ich weiß nichts davon, dass Hilberg für mich Stellung genommen hat. Er ist ziemlich dumm und verrückt. Er faselt jetzt vom Todeswunsch der Juden. Sein Buch ist wirklich ausgezeichnet, aber nur, weil er eben einfach berichtet. Ein allgemeineres, einführendes geschichtliches Kapitel ist unter der gesenkten Sau. Auch hier werden diese beiden Komponenten an Arendts Kritik oder auch Wertschätzung wieder deutlich. Also zum einen hält sie ihn für einen guten quasi Historiker, der eben aus den Quellen berichtet, aber eine interpretierende, darüber hinausgehende Einschätzung bezeichnet sie eben als dumm und verrückt. Was genau verbirgt sich nun inhaltlich hinter Arendts Kritik an Hilbergs Einführungskapitel? Dazu möchte ich mir nun die Kollaborationsthese näher angucken. In dieser Kollaborationsthese oder sogenannten Kollaborationsthese schreibt Hilberg in seiner Fassung, in der Dissertationsfassung von 1961, Zitat: Much has been said and much has been written about the Judenräte, the informers, the Jewish police, the capos, in short, all those persons who deliberately and as a matter of policy cooperated with the Germans. In seiner Fassung, die 20 Jahre später im Englischen und 1990 auch im Deutschen erschien, schreibt Hilberg, Zitat: Die jüdische Führung in den polnischen Ghettos stand an der Spitze der Unterwerfungsbewegung. Die Ghettoführer waren die Vollstrecker der Kapitulation. Stets lieferten sie einige Juden aus, um die anderen zu retten. Hilberg hat im englischsprachigen Raum 3 Ausgaben von seiner Dissertationsschrift herausgegeben, die er interessanterweise also immer wieder verändert und weiter erarbeitet hat, aufgrund auch von neuen Quellen. Interessant ist dabei, dass er in diesen Ausgaben stückweise auf die Kritik an seiner sogenannten Kollaborationsthese eingeht, was wir hier in der späteren Fassung sehen können. Hier findet eine Art Rechtfertigung statt, während die erste Kritik wirklich sehr vehement war, schreibt Hilberg hier auch, dass einige Juden eben ausgeliefert wurden, um andere zu retten. Das findet man bei Arendt nicht. Arendt schreibt, Zitat: Die Rolle der jüdischen Führer bei der Zerstörung ihres eigenen Volkes ist für Juden zweifellos das dunkelste Kapitel in der ganzen dunklen Geschichte. Das heißt, diese frühe These Hilbergs ähnelt im Grunde her der These Arendts, die eben besagt, die jüdische Führung habe mit den Nazis kollaboriert, was eben den Nationalsozialisten in die Hände gespielt habe. Es finden sich jedoch inhaltliche Unterschiede in der Reichweite der Kritik am Judentum. Arendt teilt so zwar in Anlehnung an Hilberg die Einschätzung der jüdischen Kollaboration mit den Nazis, allerdings formuliert sie diese spezifisch für die Zeit des Nationalsozialismus. Hilberg dagegen sieht in der Kollaboration und dem mangelnden Widerstand der Juden unter der nationalsozialistischen Herrschaft ein historisch gewachsenes, spezifisches Opferverhalten des Judentums, das er bis auf das 4. Jahrhundert nach Christus zurückverfolgt. Hilberg schreibt: Die Vernichtung der europäischen Juden durch die Deutschen war ein brachialer Gewaltakt. Der jüdische Zusammenbruch unter dem deutschen Ansturm war eine Manifestation des Scheiterns. Beide Phänomene bildeten den Schlusspunkt einer langen Vorgeschichte. Also dieses spezifische Opferverhalten kennzeichnet sich durch Hilberg dadurch, dass die Juden in der Rolle des Opfers verharren, ohne Gegenwehr zu leisten, und zwar schon seit Jahrhunderten. Und das ist dann eben die geschichtliche Kontextualisierung, die Hannah Arendt für dumm und verrückt hält und die zum Kernpunkt ihrer Kritik an Hilberg wird. Schauen wir uns die These der Banalität an. Hier ist es Hilberg, der Hannah Arendt aufs Schärfste kritisiert. Er sagt auf einer Konferenz in Potsdam 1997, Zitat: Eichmann, ganz einfach, war nicht banal. Hier muss ich sagen, dass sie den Eichmann einfach nicht kannte. Die Dokumente, das heißt die Akten, hatte sie nicht durchgesehen. Die hatte zwar das Verhör vor dem Prozess, dennoch hatte sie etwa 3 Tage vor der Aussage Eichmanns in Jerusalem Israel verlassen. Sie hörte Eichmann in Jerusalem überhaupt nicht. Sie hatte einen Teil seiner argentinischen Memoiren, Niederschriften, und sie hatte nicht das Transkript des ganzen Verfahrens. Und wenn sie es hätte studieren wollen, so müsste sie monatelang nur den Inhalt von 6000 Seiten grübeln. Für mich war das eine Arbeit von 3 Monaten. nachdem ich schon etwa 13 oder 14 Jahre mit dem Thema beschäftigt war. Also hatte sie gar keine Ahnung. Nun ist es Hilberg, der Arendts wissenschaftliche Arbeitsweise kritisiert, indem er ihr vorwirft, dass sie die Quellen nicht ausreichend studiert habe. Besonders kritisch ist für ihn, dass sie das Wort banal zur Charakterisierung Eichmanns wählte. Er fragt, Zitat, ist es, um mehr Bücher zu verkaufen, ein Versuch, etwas Griffiges darzubieten? Mit der Banalität Eichmanns meinte sie es ernst. Und das war Hilbergs zentraler Vorwurf. Arendt habe diese Annahme aus voller Überzeugung getroffen, während Hilberg in seinem Lebenswerk in jahrzehntelanger Arbeit versucht hatte, das Gegenteil, die Komplexität der Vernichtung nachzuweisen. Eichmann, so sein Standpunkt, war alles andere als banal. Zitat: Er war Organisator, Drahtzieher, Antreiber und Aufseher und er entwickelte die unheimliche Gabe, führende Juden zu seinen Helfershelfern zu machen. Während des Vernichtungsprozesses war Eichmann ganz in seinem Element. Im Labyrinth des Verwaltungsapparates war Eichmann Pfadfinder und er beherrschte die Technik der Vernichtung wie kein zweiter. Arendt teilt zwar diese Annahme über die Komplexität des Prozesses, sieht darin gleichzeitig aber auch die Banalität der Vollstrecker. In ihrem Prozessbericht hebt sie hervor, dass das Töten in Form von Massenvernichtung für Eichmann ein logistisch zu bewältigendes Problem dargestellt habe. Dabei sei ihm die Abwägung zwischen Gut und Böse fremd geworden. Eichmann und seine Helfer sind für Arendt insofern banal, da sie bloße Befehle ausführen, ohne eigenständig zu denken oder zu urteilen. Die Erfahrung von Macht durch Mitmachen und das Handeln als bloßes Funktionieren wird für sie damit zur eigentlichen Perversion der Tat. Zitat: Ich war frappiert von der offenbaren Seichtheit des Täters, die keine Zurückführung des unbestreitbar Bösen seiner Handlung auf irgendwelche tieferen Wurzeln oder Beweggründe ermöglichte. Und weiter: Könnte vielleicht das Denken als solches, die Gewohnheit, alles zu untersuchen, was sich begibt oder die Aufmerksamkeit erregt, ohne Rücksicht auf die Ereignisse und den speziellen Inhalt, zu den Bedingungen gehören, die die Menschen davon abhalten oder geradezu dagegen prädisponieren, Böses zu tun? Arendt ging es also um eine Tendenz innerhalb der Gesellschaft, die Fähigkeit zu denken nicht auszuüben. Das heißt, in diesen beiden Interpretationsweisen lassen sich eigentlich zurückführen auf einen wissenschaftlichen Standort der beiden, von Arendt und Hilberg, die bestimmte Denkweisen zuließen oder eben nicht zuließen. Abschließend möchte ich noch auf Hilbergs Position gegenüber Arendt eingehen. Hilberg hatte Arendt in keiner seiner 3 Ausgaben im Englischsprachigen, auch nicht in der deutschsprachigen Übersetzung rezipiert, und zwar ganz bewusst, wofür er teilweise jedoch auch sehr heftig kritisiert wurde, und zwar eben aufgrund dieser inhaltlichen Nähe der beiden Werke. Warum hat Hilberg sich bewusst dagegen entschieden, Arendt zu rezipieren? Im Wesentlichen stecken da 2 Gründe dahinter, die auch miteinander zusammenhängen. Das ist zum einen Hilbergs Vorwurf, Arendt habe ihn plagiiert. Diesen Vorwurf fasst Hilberg schon kurz nach dem Erscheinen von Arendts Prozessbericht in den New Yorker und wendet sich damit dann auch mit ihrem Verdacht an ihren Verlag Viking. Arendt selbst und der Verlag bestreiten diese Vorwürfe und Hilberg erwägt, einen Anwalt einzuschalten, wovon ihm aber sein eigener Verleger abgeraten hat. Was allerdings in Hilbergs Nachlass sehr schön zu sehen ist, ist, dass er dort diesen Originalprozessbericht aufgehoben hat und die Stellen markiert hat mit Seitenzahlenvermerk, an denen Arendt angeblich von ihm abgeschrieben haben soll. Zu diesem Plagiarismusvorwurf kommt ein zweiter Vorwurf. Hilberg schreibt hier in einem Brief an einen Kollegen, Zitat: Going through her papers in the Library of Congress, I discovered that it was she who had advised Princeton University Press when that organization turned down my manuscript on the destruction of the European Jews in 1959. Her reason? The subject had already been exhausted in the literature. Einige von Ihnen kennen vielleicht die langwierige Publikationsgeschichte von Hilbergs Dissertationsschrift. Hilberg hatte große Schwierigkeiten, einen Verleger zu finden, und erst nach einigen Jahren konnte er sein Werk in einem kleinen Verlag in Chicago veröffentlichen. Er macht also hier Arendt mit dafür verantwortlich, dass er diesen schwierigen Publikationsprozess hatte, die ihn eben stellvertretend für Princeton University Press abgelehnt hatte. Jedoch hat sie nicht nur das, sie hat ihn nicht nur abgelehnt, sondern noch dazu, später aber von ihm abgeschrieben. Und diese Kombination der Vorwürfe wird dann zu Hilbergs grundlegender Kritik, auf die er dann später weitere Vorwürfe aufbaut. Wenn man nun in die Nachlässe von Hannah Arendt und Raul Hilberg blickt, dann findet sich kein solches Gutachten oder Schreiben von Hannah Arendt an Princeton University Press, in der sie ein solches Urteil gefällt hat. Was sich findet, ist der Brief, auf den Hilberg sich hier bezieht. In seinen Memoiren hat er nämlich spezifischer nochmal erörtert, wie er zu diesem Vorwurf kommt. Und hier schreibt er, Zitat, Coincidentally, I unearthed a letter addressed to her by Gordon Hubel, der damalige Verleger von Princeton University Press. In that letter, I discovered that the press had turned to her for an evaluation of my manuscript. Here then was the source of Hubel's argument that Reitlinger, Polyakov, and Adler had exhausted the subject. This assessment was Hannah Arendt's thinking. Wenn man sich diesen Originalbrief von Hubel an Arendt anschaut, findet sich Folgendes. Also das ist der Originalbrief und Hubels Aussage an Arendt ist, Zitat, Bob Palmer has told us that you gave him invaluable assistance in his evaluation of Raul Hilbergs manuscript und so weiter. Das heißt, was hierin deutlich wird, ist, dass nicht Arendt die eigentliche Gutachterin von Hilbergs Buch war, sondern der US-amerikanische Historiker Robert Palmer, der mit Arendt in engem Kontakt stand und offensichtlich sich an sie gewendet hat für einen Rat zu dieser möglichen Publikation. Leider verliert sich die Spur von diesem Briefwechsel dann, denn Robert Palmer hat keinen Nachlass hinterlassen, sodass sich also ein Urteil von Arendt leider wohl wahrscheinlich verloren gegangen ist. Man weiß also nicht, welche Stellung Arendt eigentlich zu Hilberg zu diesem Zeitpunkt bezogen hat. Das heißt, dass Hilberg diese gesamten Vorwürfe an Arendt eigentlich auf einem Vorwurf aufbaut, für den es keinen Beleg gibt. Was sind mögliche Gründe für dieses harsche Verhalten von Hilberg? Hilberg, nachdem er so lange auch eine Art Außenseiterstellung in der Geschichtswissenschaft und der Politikwissenschaft eingenommen hatte, ging es dann in den letzten Jahrzehnten seiner Karriere darum, sein Werk möglichst zu einer Art Pionierwerk zu machen. Ihm war es sehr wichtig, dass sein Werk als das Standardwerk im Bereich der Holocaust-Forschung galt. Arendt sah er dabei als mögliche Konkurrentin an. Sie wurde etwa in Deutschland schon weit früher aufgelegt und weit breiter rezipiert als er. Sein Werk wurde erst in den 80er Jahren ins Deutsche übersetzt und als in den 60er Jahren ein Verlag über die Publikation, über die Übersetzung ins Deutsche nachdachte, erhielt er schließlich die Antwort, dass es bereits Eichmann in Jerusalem gäbe und dass sie seine Übersetzung daher nicht mehr brauchten. Das heißt, hier spielt auch der Kampf um Position im Bereich der Wissenschaft eine große Rolle. Das Verhältnis dieser beiden Wissenschaftler ist trotz allem sehr schwer zu rekonstruieren. Ich habe nun versucht, einige Erklärungsansätze zu liefern, die diese harschen und teils auch wirklich unsachlichen Vorhaltungen erklären können und gleichzeitig auch einen Einblick in das Denken der beiden Wissenschaftler zu geben. In das Bewusstsein der Öffentlichkeit trat dieser Konflikt erst auf der bereits angesprochenen Konferenz 1997 in Potsdam. Und ich möchte den Vortrag gerne mit einem Zitat Hilbergs abschließen, das seine Vorhaltung sehr gut zusammenfasst. Zitat: Wer erinnert sich an Ereignisse? Man erinnert sich nicht an Ereignisse. Man erinnert sich an Bücher. Ich ringe seit 33 Jahren mit Hannah Arendt, ob sie nun lebt oder tot ist. Immer wieder, wie ein Gespenst, kommt sie zurück. Vielen Dank.
Jewish identity played a significant role in the life and the writings of Hannah Arendt. In her early writings, Rachel Fahrenhagen's biography, her essays on Zionism from the 40s, and the origins of totalitarianism, the social status of the Jews in modern times can be seen as the key element that shaped Arendt's understanding of nationalism, totalitarianism, and modernity. In her later work, The Human Condition and the Life of the Mind, there's hardly any mention of the Jews. So I can stop here and say there's no mention of the Jews, and the lecture is more or less over. However, in this paper, I intend to show that Judaism is not absent in the later writings of Arendt, but rather it appears in a different form. The same role Arendt ascribes to Jewishness in her early writings is present and is very central in the later work, but in the later work, Arendt chooses to give it a different name, and a surprising name. She calls the Jew a philosopher. Arendt is using the figure of the lone philosopher as a mirror to the Jew as pariah that was central in her early works. And accordingly, the seemingly biographical question in the title of this paper, a title which I suspect Arendt would have not liked, becomes an impersonal question, a discussion about the role of philosophy in the political world. Jewishness for Arendt was a fact that one had to confront. This kind of confrontation could naturally lead a person to depart from Jewish identity or to different sorts of denial. But this was not the case for Arendt. She once said that for many years I considered the only adequate reply to the question, "Who are you?" to be a Jew. In one of her early letters to Karl Jaspers, her friend and mentor, she wrote, "On the foundation of being Jewish, a certain possibility of existence can arise that I have tentatively and for the time being called faithfulness. This faithfulness arises from the very fact of foundationlessness and can occur only in separation from Judaism." Arendt differentiates here between the religion, which she calls Judaism or Judentum, and which she rejects almost completely, and the mode of existence or the Jewish condition, which she calls Jewishness or being Jewish or Judensein, and which she takes upon herself as an obvious fact. Many years later, in her well-known answer to Gershom Scholem's claim that she has no Ahavat Israel, after the Eichmann trial, Arendt wrote, "To be a Jew belongs to me to the indisputable facts of my life, and I have never had the wish to change or disclaim facts of this kind. There's a certain thing as a basic gratitude for everything that is as it is." Combining these two quotes from different parts of her life, we can see that the gratitude that Arendt felt was not aimed towards the atmosphere of Jewish holidays, nor to the feeling of belonging to a community, nor towards the benefits that comes with Jewish identity. On the contrary, it is towards a lack, a homelessness, a foundationlessness which brings along with all its difficulties also an advantage, a certain mode of existence which she calls the pariah. Arendt learned the distinction between the conscious pariah and the parvenu from Bernard Lazare and from Max Weber, who used the original Hindu term pariah in the European context. This is quite known, so I will be brief. The pariah is an outcast, an excluded person. The conscious pariah takes pride in his stance as a stranger in society. And as a stranger within, he finds the advantage of his position. The pariah, precisely because he is an outcast, can see life as a whole. The pariah looks at the world from a position of within without, contrary to those who take part in society and gain from its benefits. The pariah is pushed to criticize society and to see its shortcomings more clearly. full partners in society will find it hard to let go of the chains that restrict their thinking, like the chains of the prisoners in Plato's cave. But on the other hand, people who are completely out of the social order, like the philosopher up in the sun, might be pushed to just leave and would not struggle to change society. The pariah stands between these two problematic options. His perspective is somewhat paradoxical. Although he is banned from society, he nonetheless feels responsible for changing it. When the pariah enters the political sphere, he becomes a rebel. A few of Arendt's critics think that in her last years, she was not interested anymore in the stand of the pariah or in Jewish matters. Some say it was the result of the Eichmann controversy. Arendt was so offended by the hostile responses she got from Jews in America and in Israel that she decided not to deal anymore with Jewish matters. Although these critics might be right from a biographical perspective, I believe they fall into an ad hominem trap. They analyze Arendt's personal psychology instead of her claims as a philosopher. If Jewish identity, as manifested in the figure of the pariah, was considered by Arendt a preferred standpoint for criticizing society from a within-without position, then instead of asking where are the Jews in the later writings, we should ask if we can find the stranger within in the human condition in the life of the mind. For this is what Jewish condition meant for Arendt in the first place. I suggest that the figure of the lone philosopher, central in the life of the mind, is where Arendt puts the focal point of criticism in her later work. And in this way, the philosopher and the pariah have many things in common. Both in the life of the mind and in Kant lectures, Arendt wrote about the philosopher as a spectator of human society. In the human condition, where the lone philosopher does not appear, similar ideas are discussed, mainly when Arendt is writing about thinking and about how thinking becomes action. A somewhat close figure to the lone philosopher in the human condition is the storyteller or the historian, who indeed always knows better what it was all about than the participants. The storyteller and the philosopher have a privileged perspective on reality since they withdraw from action, that is, withdraw from real life. Arendt used a few times a quote from Pythagoras that can tell much about the role of philosophy in her approach. Life is like a festival. Just as some come to the festival to compete, some to ply their trade, but the best people come as spectators. So, in life, the slavish men go hunting for fame or gain, the philosophers for truth. According to Pythagoras, the actor or doer is interested in how people would react to whatever he does and in the benefits that might result from his actions. The spectator is completely autonomous in his bios theoreticos or contemplative life. He thinks about reality and does not try to change it. Arendt, for no doubt, admired the Pythagorean spectator, just as much as she admired her prototype of a philosopher, Heidegger. But she also knew very well their pitfalls. On the one hand, she thought that withdrawal is the only possible way for free thinking, and that is pure thinking, as Heller was putting it yesterday in the lecture, pure thinking. So withdrawal is the only possible way for free thinking, and that an active life could lead very easily into the decline of thinking. On the other hand, her wide discussion on action, mainly in the human condition, but also in a few sections in the life of the mind, show that her later thought is far from being the kind of pure philosophy that Marx was mocking in his famous 11th thesis on Feuerbach. Hans Jonas, Arendt's close friend, says recalls that about the time that when she was writing in The Life of the Mind, she told him, "I have done my bit in politics. No more of that. From now on and for what is left, I would deal with trans-political things," which means philosophy. Indeed, one can feel a shift in Arendt's work from political theory into more abstract philosophy between the human condition and the life of the mind. However, seeing the life of the mind as trans-political philosophy, as she wants us to see it, misses much of the complexity that Arendt's found in thinking. A close reading in The Life of the Mind shows that how ambivalent Arendt was about the role of the lone philosopher in the political world. Indeed, thinking was for her always a stand against the world. Thinking is always out of order. It interrupts all ordinary activities and is interrupted by them. But exactly because of this, thinking is a rebellion against the existing order of things. Thinking is meaningful only if it is connected to the other two most important faculties that humans have, judging and acting. Arendt knew very well that the philosopher cannot live in Heidegger's cabin in the woods or stay in the sun like Plato's philosopher who climbed out of the prisoner's cave. We can assume that Plato's philosopher understood this too right after he went back into the cave and before he was executed by the prisoners. But the threat to the philosopher from the society around him is only one part of the story. The harm that his philosophy might cause to society is the other. Arendt said that the withdrawal of the philosopher into the standpoint of the observer can very easily lead to no action at all in the better cases or to terrible kinds of action in the worst cases. This might happen when the philosopher does not see the connection between thinking and judging. And I'm using a quote that was already used yesterday, a little bit longer. The faculty of judging particulars, as brought to light by Kant, the ability to say this is wrong, this is beautiful, and so on, is not the same as the faculty of thinking. Judging, the byproduct of the liberating effect of thinking, realizes thinking, makes it manifest in the world of appearances, where I'm never alone and always too busy to think, to be able to think. The manifestation of the wind of thought is not knowledge. It is the ability to tell right from wrong, beautiful from ugly. And this, at the rare moments when the stakes are on the table, may indeed prevent catastrophes, at least for the self. Frankly, since I want to make a point here about the role of philosophy in the political world, I would have preferred that the last 5 words in this quote would be erased. So I can present the text as if it was saying that thinking and judging can prevent catastrophes and not follow Arendt with her return to the concern for the philosopher himself. A Marxist would have probably presented the text without these words, but unfortunately I'm not a real Marxist, and these words are there. Arendt stayed with a complex attitude towards thinking and acting. She did not follow Marx with the superiority of action changing the world over thinking, nor with the withdrawal of action in the Pythagorean, Heideggerian, also Platonian spectator. Arendt thought that when society is swept away unthinkably by totalitarian rule, thinking and its byproduct, judging, becomes the last blockades on the slippery road. Philosophers who did not understand that were drawn into serious traps and became advocates of a tyrant or Führer. Arendt found an ideal bridge, an ideal model to bridge over the tension between thinking, judging, and acting in Socrates' market philosophy. Plato thought that the role of the philosopher is to know the truth, and in the name of this truth acquire the ability to be a better ruler of society. For Socrates, philosophy played a role of a mediator between ideas and between people. Now, this might sound problematical for serious researchers of Greek philosophy. So let me just say that this portrait of Socrates I'm using is not mine, it is Arendt's portrait. However, I think that even if it's hard to see Arendt's claim in The Life of the Mind that Socrates lived in both worlds, philosophy and politics, as his historically adequate portrait of Socrates, if there is such a thing as a historically adequate portrait of Socrates, I think there's much philosophers can learn from this portrait. Thinking inevitably has a destructive, undermining effect on all established criteria, values, measurements of good and evil. In short, on those customs and rules of conduct we treat of in morals and ethics. These frozen thoughts, Socrates seems to say, come so handily that you can use them in your sleep. But if the wind of thinking, which I shall now steer in you, has shaken you from your sleep and made you fully awake and alive, then you will see that you will have nothing in your grasp but perplexities, and the best you can do with them is share them with others. We can see that Arendt's emphasis on action does not lead her to abandon the idea of the lone philosopher or pariah Jew who withdraws from the world, but rather to a more sophisticated model of this loner. It also does not lead her to a model in which the philosopher thinks and right afterwards begins to act. She thought that philosophy indeed stems from an experience of solitude, but its goal is not to stay in the solitude. Its goal is to contribute to human plurality in two ways. The first is that the lone philosopher adds ideas that cannot be found without him because of human conformity, or as Socrates called it, the philosopher as a gadfly. Second, philosophy serves as a mediator between different truths, and in this way enables them to live together in spite of their differences and still be productive, or the philosopher as a midwife, as Socrates puts it. Three major interrelated elements in Arendt's work, thinking, judging, and acting, were considered by her the main faculties of humans. The first two are at the center of the life of the mind. The third is at the center of the human condition. Arendt thought that they are dependent on one on the other. Thinking is needed for judging. Judging is needed for action. Modernity makes many give up these faculties because people are tied up with their daily tasks of work and labor. That is, they are tied up with fulfilling their fixed role within the order of modern national mass society. Insiders take upon themselves the axioms of society, Complete outsiders, on the other hand, are the ones who pack their things and just leave when it gets too hard for them. The Jew is pariah, lone philosopher, the Jew is pariah and the lone philosophers find their ways between these roads. In both cases, the pariah and the philosopher, Arendt did not portray a simple one-dimensional, totally positive figure. In both cases, the obligation towards society comes out of alienation from it, and therefore, in both cases, Arendt's aspiration that the pariah and the philosopher would act is based on endless tension. Vielen Dank.
I first want to thank Avner, not only for his great talk, but also because he pretty much set the background for my lecture, or for my talk, or for the arguments I'm going to try to make. And because Avner presents what I would call the common narrative about Arendt, or about Arendt's response to the banality of evil. And what I'm going to try to claim is that Arendt had another response which was much more thoroughly political than the one that is usually attributed to her. And basically what I'm going to argue is that participatory democracy, especially in the form of a citizen council system, which Arendt advocated on various occasions, this was actually a political response to the banality of evil. It's very different from what one usually finds in scholarship, so I'm going to try to make a somewhat complex argument, so I hope you'll bear with me. There is a common narrative about Arendt's trajectory once she was exposed to Eichmann's banality. The poet of political life, as Kimberly Curtis has called her, gradually moved to the inner realm of the mind, focusing on thinking as a bulwark against the individual's participation in evil, as well as on judgment, understood not as an actor's judgment, as before, but as the solitary business of the spectator. Gone is the vibrant Arendtian public realm in which citizens meet each other in the manner of speech and action. Instead, as Nancy Fraser puts it, judging here remains a monological process wherein one goes visiting in imagination as opposed to in reality. One imagines oneself judging from various different perspectives instead of going out and talking to and listening to other people. True, judgment remains somewhat political in the sense, as one commentator notes, that it carries the trace of company and hence a trace of plurality that being with others implies. But that's about it. Ultimately, so the dominant narrative goes, Arendt left us with the figure of the critical thinker, who, quote, does not make the moral mistake of the masses, that's another commentator, of acting as if it is business as usual during times of crisis when Moors completely lose their ethical character. And one last quote from a commentator, as well as with a genuine astonishment, how could Hannah Arendt, a lifelong champion of the public sphere, write at the end of her life that thinking, not acting, is what counts when the chips are down? In an earlier, unpublished version of her lectures on Kant's political philosophy, Arendt writes, "We deal with a form of being together when no one rules and no one obeys, where people persuade each other." When one reads the many scholarly accounts of Arendt's theory of judgment, this statement can only appear perplexing. First, the scholarly literature commonly focuses on individuals and their capacity for judgment, and I try to give some examples of that. Understood as an effort that takes place in one's imagination rather than in an actual community. Second, the notion of a community in which no one rules and no one is ruled is commonly discussed in reference to Arendt's theory of action and the public sphere. More specifically, it is discussed either in the context of Arendt's nostalgic moments, where she celebrates the Greek polis as such a community, what she calls an isonomy, or her utopian moments, where she discusses the citizen council system as a potentially new form of participatory democratic government. In order to even begin this statement, then, I would argue, one has to question several dominant interpretations of Arendt's theory of judgment and its development. First, as is established in scholarship, Arendt did not turn to Kant's theory of judgment following the Eichmann trial. Whatever use she made of Kant later on, the fact remained that she turned to Kant's theory of judgment already in 1957. Among other important implications, this fact also brings Arendt's reflection on Kantian judgment much closer in a more organic continuity to a reflection on the concept of phronesis. In several places, Arendt explicitly presents this concept as pointing to the same political capacity, the ability to see the world from the other's point of view. As she puts it, for example, in the essay Introduction into Politics, over the ensuing years, since the Greeks, hardly anyone speaks of phronesis. We do not run across it again until Kant, in his discussion of common sense as the faculty of judgment, he calls it an enlarged mentality. Despite this and other clear statements by Arendt, scholars tend to distance Arendt's Kantian judgment from the concept of phronesis, and there seem to be too many tensions between these concepts. Phronesis is an Aristotelian concept, And for Aristotle, it means a capacity for practical reason of the phronimos, the statesman. Kantian judgment, in contrast, belongs to the field of aesthetics and therefore relates to the position of the spectator. Phronesis and judgment, then, seem to pull in opposite directions. There are other related tensions between these concepts that are of less concern to us here, especially when one realizes a major problem in the whole scholarly discussion. Commentators take it for granted that when using the concept of phronesis, Arendt basically follows Aristotle. However, I would argue this is not the case. Arendt refers to phronesis as the Greek understanding of the political capacity of the statement, and treats Aristotle as giving a certain expression to this understanding, a move that allows her to reinterpret this concept. Arendt interprets phronesis as the ability of the statesman to understand the different ways the world appears to different citizens, namely to see the world from their standpoint. Phronesis then becomes in Arendt a capacity for spectatorship, in a similar manner to that of Kantian judgment. Moreover, Arendt is interested in the capacity of ordinary citizens for phronesis rather than that of the statement. As she puts it, if such an understanding, namely to see the world from the other's point of view, an action inspired by it were to take place without the help of the statesman, then the prerequisite would be for each citizen to be articulate enough to show his opinion in his truthfulness and therefore to understand his fellow citizens. The citizens then could do without any statement, namely without any rulers, if they acquired the capacity for phronesis. This is precisely what Socrates attempted to achieve. What? Socrates seems to have believed that the political function of the philosopher was to help establish this kind of common world, built on the understanding of friendship, in which no rulership is needed. Friendship, because this is what Arendt calls political friendship. You understand how the world is seen from the other point of view. We can see then that Arendt interprets phronesis to mean something very similar to a later interpretation of Kantian judgment. But here the attempt is not simply to make some few critical thinkers refrain from doing evil, but rather to create a participatory democratic political community in which citizens become more thoughtful and more capable of considered judgment, and therefore more resistant to what Arendt would later call the banality of evil. This is very different from the response scholarship usually attributes to Arendt. Here we should note another related problem with the other Socratic response Arendt suggests and on which scholars usually focus. As is well known, following the Eichmann trial, Arendt suggests that thinking might be our best bulwark against participation in evil deeds. This, of course, relates directly to her analysis of the banality of evil Eichmann represented. Rather than presenting Eichmann as a cog in the bureaucratic machine, an assumption one constantly finds in Holocaust historiography, despite Arendt's explicit denials, the evil Eichmann represented for her emerged from what she perceived as his thoughtlessness, expressed in his inability to see the world from the point of view of others, as well as in his constant use of ready-made cliches rather than responding to what was actually happening. It is this lesson that led her to investigate more thoroughly the nature of thinking, in articles published after the trial, The Loves of the Mind, and so on. Supposedly following Socrates, Arendt suggests that those who are used to living with themselves, to engage in the internal dialogue of thinking, will refrain from doing this kind of evil. They will not want to live with a murderer, and therefore they will not murder. And this is very familiar, I think. Here is the conundrum, however. It is rarely, if at all, mentioned in scholarship that Arendt not only considered the Socratic response several years before the Eichmann trial, but also rejected it in important ways. In a letter to her friend Mary McCarthy from 1954, Arendt mentioned the Socratic response to the question why a person should not murder, and the response is, since I've got to live with myself, I'm in fact the only person from whom I never shall be able to part, whose company I shall have to be able to bear forever. I don't want to become a murderer. I don't want to spend my life in the company of a murderer. So again, the Socratic response. She then dismisses it. This answer, Arendt said, is no longer good because hardly anyone nowadays lives by himself. If he is alone, he is lonely, i.e. not together with himself. Furthermore, she adds, the Socratic answer never works really because this life by oneself on which it is based is the life of the thinker par excellence. We find here then what is commonly discussed as Arendt's final response to the problem of the banality of evil together with judgment, at least partially dismissed by her. since it is relevant only to the few thinkers, if at all. It fails to address the many, or in other words, it is deeply anti-political. The question then arises, did Arendt simply drop these concerns when she dealt with the banality of evil later on? In fact, Arendt's reservations regarding Socratic answer are clear in her later work as well. The even deeper trouble with Socratic argument, she writes in Collective Responsibility, in the essay Collective Responsibility, is that it is applicable only to people who are used to living explicitly with themselves. Socrates does not talk, she adds in Thinking and More Consideration, as a citizen who is supposed to be more concerned with the world than with his own self. From the viewpoint of the community or of the world, this answer is, she said in another place, irresponsible. Its standard is the self and not the world, neither its improvement nor change. The political concern, in other words, what is with having a world in which such acts do not occur. To clarify, I do not wish to claim that Arendt dismissed the Socratic answer altogether. As she wrote on many occasions, there are extreme situations, particularly under totalitarian regimes, in which responsibility for the world simply, quote, cannot be assumed because political responsibility always presupposes at least a minimum of political power. And in these situations, those who still refuse to participate in evil do so because they know they would not be able to live with themselves. Yet, Arendt's reservations about the Socratic response should be taken much more seriously than is usually the case, I think. In fact, it should not be surprising that Arendt is hardly satisfied with the Socratic answer. This answer goes against the very core of her political philosophy. Relying in politics on our concern with the self rather than on our concern with the world is precisely what Arendt criticizes in The Human Condition as a Platonic legacy, part of our philosophical tradition's hostility to politics. It is this problem with Socratic answer that led Arendt to turn to Kant. As she puts it, if we consider morality in more than its negative aspect, that's a quote, the refraining from doing wrong, which may mean refraining from doing anything, then we shall have to consider human conduct in terms which Kant thought appropriate only for aesthetic conduct. Here we arrive at three fundamental problems in our attempt to reconstruct what Arendt tried to tease out from Kant. First, it is well known she did not live to write a full account of Kantian judgment and its implication. Second, she was attempting to tease out a political response to evil from a thinker who lived in an authoritarian state with little space for political action by citizens, and wrote his philosophical works under these conditions. Third, when one examines Arendt's various accounts of judgment, one finds that she had in mind different kinds of spectators who judge. There is the spectator outside the public sphere who examines what is happening from a position of impartiality, which is also the position Arendt herself believed she was in a report on the Eichmann trial. There is then the inner Socratic spectator who judges what one does. Finally, and most controversially, there are spectators within the public sphere who put forward their opinions regarding what was done and should be done. In other words, if action in the strict Arendtian sense means beginning something new in the public sphere, then the exchange of opinion, which Arendt discusses at length in The Human Condition as well as in On Revolution, is nothing but the judgments of the participants in the public sphere regarding public matters in which they are involved as citizens. Those spectators might then turn to act collectively, but once they act, they no longer judge, and vice versa. These complexities serve to obscure, I would argue, what should be obvious in light of Arendt's long-standing warnings against the depoliticization and atomization of Western societies, which led to the rise of totalitarianism as well as to many lesser evils, as well as in light of her corresponding long-standing support for participatory democracy in the form of a citizen council system. The capacity for thinking and judging, as Arendt writes, can be, quote, practiced only, and cannot be taught. In order to foster this capacity among citizens, they need to constantly practice it by participating in the public sphere, exchanging opinions with their fellow citizens, and so learning to see the world from the other's point of view. What we need is therefore a form of government in which citizens are equal partners in public discussions and decisions, namely radical participatory democracy. Athens, in Arendt's description of it, was precisely this kind of community, or at least what Socrates attempted to make of it. The form of modern government that could achieve A similar extent and depth of participation is the council system Arendt advocated. It is this recognition that led Arendt to consider Kantian judgment as part of an attempt to lay the theoretical groundwork for a community where no one rules and no one is being ruled. Participatory democracy, then, was Arendt's political response to the banality of evil, in distinction to the more limited, more problematic, and more personal Socratic answer. Thank you.